The first thing I noticed was the sound, a thin, broken cry that slipped through the noise of horns and footsteps like it didn't belong in the world at all. I almost ignored it. Almost. But then it came again, sharper this time, full of urgency, and something in my chest tightened. Near the edge of the sidewalk, a tiny kitten stood frozen, its fur dusty, its ribs faintly visible beneath skin stretched too tight. Its eyes were huge, glassy with fear, fixed directly on me as if it had already chosen me for something important. I took one step closer, and the kitten darted back, then stopped. It turned around, looked at me again, and cried, longer, louder, pleading. It didn't run away like strays usually do. Instead, it took a few cautious steps forward, then glanced over its shoulder, as though checking whether I was following. The movement felt deliberate, almost practiced, and that was when I realized this wasn't random. This kitten wasn't lost. It was asking. People passed by without slowing down. Someone brushed past me, nearly stepping on the kitten's tail, but it didn't flinch. Its attention stayed locked on me, unwavering. The cry changed, rising and falling like a siren that refused to shut off. I crouched down, heart pounding, and whispered softly, not even sure why. The kitten immediately turned and trotted a short distance away, stopping again to make sure I was still there. Against my better judgment, I followed. The kitten led me away from the main road, down a narrow side street that smelled of damp concrete and old food. The sky was dimming, the kind of gray blue that makes everything feel urgent even when nothing is happening. The kitten moved faster now, limping slightly, but never stopping. Each time it cried, the sound echoed off the walls, bouncing back heavier, sadder. As we went deeper, trash bags appeared in small piles, some torn open, their contents spilling onto the ground. The kitten slowed near a shadowed corner behind a row of closed shops. Its cries grew frantic, almost panicked, and it began circling a heap of wet cardboard and plastic, pawing at it, biting at the edges with tiny teeth that were far too small for such a task. That was when the crying changed. It wasn't just one voice anymore. From beneath the pile came a muffled, strained sound, low, weak, and wrong. The kitten let out a sharp cry and pressed its body against the heap, as if trying to protect whatever was underneath. My stomach dropped. Whatever this kitten had been trying to tell me, whatever it had trusted me to understand, was waiting right there in the shadows. And time was already running out. Expend Part 2 in 500 words without headings. The kitten clawed frantically at the pile, its small paws slipping on wet plastic as panic poured out of every sound it made. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the grime soaking into my clothes, and pulled aside the top layer of cardboard. The smell hit first, stale trash mixed with rain and something sour that made my throat tighten. Beneath it all, something moved. The kitten cried louder, pressing its face into the mess as if trying to burrow through it. I followed its gaze, my hands shaking as I peeled back a torn black plastic bag. That was when I saw her. The mother cat lay on her side, half buried, her fur matted and dark with moisture. A thick plastic bag was twisted around her body and neck, tightened by knots and trapped debris. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath shallow, each exhale a quiet struggle. Her eyes were open but dull, unfocused, as though she was already drifting somewhere far away. When my shadow fell over her, they flickered slightly, and her tail twitched weakly. The kitten climbed onto her head, rubbing its tiny face against hers, crying in short, broken bursts. It was no longer calling for help. It was begging her not to leave. I swallowed hard and reached for the plastic, but it wouldn't budge. The bag had wrapped itself tight, slick from rain and dirt, clinging to her like a second skin. I tried to pull it loose, but the mother cat flinched, a soft rasp escaping her throat. I froze, terrified of hurting her more than she already was. The kitten hissed softly at my hand, then immediately turned back to its mother, licking her face as if apologizing for the moment of fear. My fingers fumbled for anything sharp. Keys, that would have to do. I slid one carefully under the plastic, working slowly, praying the cat wouldn't panic. The kitten watched every movement, eyes wide, body trembling. Its cries now quiet but constant, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Each small tear in the plastic felt like a victory and a warning. One wrong move and it could all end. The mother cat let out a weak cough, her body shuddering. I tore the bag open wider, air rushing in as if the space itself had been holding its breath. The plastic loosened slightly, enough for her chest to expand more fully. The kitten let out a sharp cry and pressed closer, its tiny paws kneading her fur in frantic hope. As I worked, the world around us faded. The traffic, the distant voices, the evening chill, all of it disappeared. There was only the sound of plastic tearing, strained breathing, and a kitten who had refused to accept loss. And as the bag finally began to loosen its deadly grip, I realized this rescue wasn't about chance at all. It was about trust, placed bravely, desperately by a creature small enough to fit in one hand, yet strong enough to change everything. Expend Part 3 in 500 words without headings. The plastic finally gave way with a dull ripping sound, and I pulled it back inch by inch, afraid the sudden rush of freedom might shock her fragile body. The mother cat's chest stuttered, then expanded deeper than before, drawing in air as if she had forgotten how. She coughed again, harsher this time, and a thin, broken sound escaped her throat. I paused, holding my breath, watching for any sign that I'd waited too long. The kitten reacted instantly. It scrambled down from the pile and climbed onto her chest, tiny paws pressing against her ribs, kneading anxiously as if trying to restart her from the outside. It licked her face over and over, mewing in soft, urgent bursts that sounded like encouragement. "Stay. Please stay." The mother's whiskers twitched. One eye blinked slowly, then the other. It wasn't much, but it was everything. I widened the opening of the bag, peeling it away from her neck and shoulders. Her fur underneath was flattened and cold, sticking to her skin. When fresh air touched her, she flinched and tried to lift her head, but her strength failed, and it dropped back down. The kitten cried sharply, then pressed its body against her throat, as if lending her its warmth, its courage, its will to breathe. Minutes stretched painfully long. I could hear her breathing now, still ragged but steadier. Each inhale was a small Tori. I spoke softly without thinking, words tumbling out in a shaky whisper, telling her she was okay, that she wasn't alone anymore. The kitten glanced up at me once, eyes shining, then returned its full attention to its mother, refusing to let go. Slowly the mother cat gathered herself. Her paws twitched, then pushed weakly against the ground. She coughed again and managed to roll slightly onto her belly. The kitten squeaked in surprise and joy, tail flicking wildly, and immediately climbed back onto her, almost knocking her over in its excitement. For the first time, the sound it made wasn't fear. It was relief. I finished removing the last strands of plastic, tossing them aside like something poisonous, which they were. The mother cat lay still for a moment, exhausted, eyes half closed. Then she lifted her head and touched her nose to her kitten's forehead. The gesture was small, barely there, but it broke something open inside me. The kitten froze, as if stunned, then purred, a faint, trembling sound that vibrated through its tiny body. The alley felt different now, lighter, as if the darkness had loosened its grip. The mother cat's breathing evened out, and she curled one paw protectively around her kitten. She wasn't safe yet, not completely, but she was alive. And the kitten, who had cried into a world that rarely listens, had been heard just in time. Expend Part 4 in 500 words without headings. For a long moment none of us moved. The mother cat lay curled around her kitten, her body rising and falling in a slow, careful rhythm, as if each breath still needed permission to exist. The kitten pressed close to her belly, its small frame finally relaxing, the frantic tension draining away. The silence that followed felt sacred, broken only by the softest purr, fragile but steady, like a promise. I watched, unsure whether to step back or stay. The mother's eyes opened fully now, no longer glassy but alert, watchful in the quiet way only animals can be. She studied me without fear, without gratitude either, just awareness. Then, slowly, she pulled her kitten closer and licked its head, again and again, as if erasing every terrifying moment it had just endured. The kitten leaned into her touch, eyes fluttering shut, utterly spent. When the mother finally tried to stand, her legs trembled, and she sank back down with a soft grunt. I reached out instinctively, stopping myself just short of touching her. After a few seconds, she tried again. This time she managed to rise, shaky but determined, her body forming a shield around her kitten. The kitten wobbled to its feet too, bumping into her side, and she steadied it with a gentle nudge. They didn't run. Instead, the mother cat turned her head and looked straight at me. Her gaze held something deep and unmistakable, not human, yet painfully familiar. Recognition, as if she understood that her kitten's cries hadn't gone unanswered. That the world, cruel as it could be, had paused long enough to let them live. The kitten followed her gaze, staring at me with those same wide eyes that had found me on the sidewalk. It let out a soft mew, nothing like the desperate cries from before. This one felt like closure. Then the mother nudged her forward, guiding her toward the narrow opening between the buildings. Step by careful step, they moved away, disappearing into the shadows where the alley bent out of sight. I stayed there long after they were gone, the torn plastic bag lying useless at my feet. It looked small now, insignificant. Hard to believe something so ordinary had nearly stolen a life. The city sounds returned slowly, as if the world had been holding its breath with us. As I finally stood to leave, a thought settled quietly in my chest. That kitten hadn't just asked for help. It had trusted that somewhere in all the noise, someone would listen. And because of that trust, 2 lives walked back into the dark together, not as victims, but as survivors. Sometimes, hope doesn't roar or shine. Sometimes, it cries softly from the pavement, on 4 trembling paws, waiting for a heart willing to stop and answer.